Sounds great.
Hello, my name is Erin Colburn. I'm the Pre-Health Advising Coordinator for the College of Health Sciences at Boise State University. It's a great pleasure to introduce individuals and representatives from Roseman University down in Utah that have a dental program. I have Dr. William Harmon, and I'm going to turn the time over to him and let him share some information about his school and institution.
Great, thank you. Also joining us is Dr. Dwayne Winden, who's our Assistant Dean for Academic Affairs. Between the two of us, we handle everything that is referred to as havoc, mayhem, and chaos, so we're pretty good. I do have a request. Those of you who are on the call, would you turn your videos on so that we can actually interact? Because we're going to be asking you to join us in the discussion. This isn't a lecture. So we're good. Good to see all of you. So anyway, we are going to talk with you. Dwayne, could we go to the next slide? We're going to be talking with you today about some things that we think are important. And I want to frame this a little bit so you understand our presentation. And that is, we're going to talk about going beyond acceptance to dental school. Because that's, to me, just the first step in the decision process. As Erin has heard me talk about before, I frequently talk about going beyond grades and DAT scores when we're assessing the preparation of students. And Dwayne and I were talking just before now, and we said, you know, we ought to incorporate that into a slide. So this slide was literally created, what, 20 minutes ago? I think something like that. So you'll find that we tend to modify things rapidly, which is kind of fun. But I want to talk with you about getting your thinking beyond just getting to dental school, because what I hear from a lot of students is, got to get in, got to get in, got to get in. And they keep structuring everything they do to get that goal, which is fine. But that's not the goal for us. Our goal is to make sure that you match with our program. So we're not here to recruit you. We're not here to convince you that Roseman is the place for you to be. Rather, we're going to talk about a very unique and innovative program that's unlike anything I've experienced in dental education. I've worked with 49 of the dental schools. I've been a dean at, I think 4 or 5 of them at this point. So I've got a pretty good idea of what's out there in terms of dental education, and it's a very different program. So we want you to be asking questions about how you match with it, because as you'll see in the bullet there, we're going to have somewhere between 2,500 and 4,000 applicants this coming year for a class of 100. We're not going to have a problem filling the class. What we do have a problem with is filling the class with people who match with our program. So we're going to tell you a lot about who we are and how we do things. And I want you to be taking notes whenever you want to, particularly asking yourself questions about how you match with us, things that maybe you need to think about it some more. So that's what we're doing. And I will start with something that you need to know about our program, and that is we do everything in teams here, everything. When we do our courses, which we call blocks, we do them in teams, large teams and smaller teams. When you do simulation clinic, you're doing it in teams because we want you to have the experience of seeing twice as much dentistry going on, like what you were talking about a few moments ago about doing your composite restoration. We want you to see double that. Plus, you're learning to work in four-handed environments. When you work by yourself, you don't get that four-handed experience. When you go in the clinic, you're going to be in teams. Again, you're working in four-handed environment, not just individually. We do service in teams. We do research in teams. I'm sure I've left something out that we do in teams, that description, but you need to think about first, do you like working in teams? And if your answer is yes, that's a good thing for our program. If your answer is no, might not be a good match. So I'd say to you, first of all, if you are not used to working in teams, go get some experience with it to see if you can see the power of teams allows everybody to get better, not just individually.
Just for a moment, this is a different, I know several of you have probably been put in teams in a class to work on a project or something, and someone does all the work and someone else does none of the work. And seems unfair and so forth. That's not the kind of team that we're talking about. This really is a team that works together, supports each other. Everyone pulls their weight and we move forward together.
And a good example of that is we know that healthcare is going to be a team delivered. Can't think of the word I'm looking for. Healthcare is going to be delivered in teams. And our feeling is if we're going to prepare you for a team-based environment, we need to start that in dental school, not afterwards. So literally from day one of orientation, day one of the curriculum, you are in teams. So that comes to the next thing, and that is, do you like competition or collaboration? We have figured out how to eliminate or nearly eliminate competition from dental school. I'm sure that many of you, and request to Shannon and Courtney, if you turn your cameras on when you can, I'd like to be able to interact with you. The thing that I'm looking at in teams is that they work best when you're collaborating, not competing. When you look at our program, we have nearly eliminated competition by getting rid of traditional grades and getting rid of ranking. And then when you get rid of those and you focus instead about standards, people tend to collaborate. They help each other get better. And that's part of our model. The third thing I'm going to present to you, for those of you that just joined, I do encourage you to ask questions and to look at these. Are you open to using data and feedback to improve your performance? We give feedback based on data, based on observed performance on a near continuous basis. It's not once in a while, it's throughout the day. So when we look at feedback, when we look at data, the emphasis we have is on helping us improve. It's a consistent improvement that we think is important. And I think that's kind of implicit in what I said about teams, but we're going to be asking you to think about, are you willing to make commitments to each other and to yourself that will help all of you improve and also help you complete what is a very rigorous program on time in 3 years. So when we kind of look at this, we're interested in people that are going to do this. We just graduated our class of 2022 last week. 100 people started the program, 100 people finished. And that's part of the power of teams and this collaborative model is that when people are struggling with something, faculty identify that very quickly, students identify it very quickly by working in teams, and we're able to improve performance. And finally, a question that I want you to be thinking about is, are you open to change? And I will tell you that for those of you who weren't on just yet, this slide was literally created well within the last half hour. I've lost the exact moments at this point. But as we see ways that we can improve things, we change. When I started at one of the other schools where I was dean of students, my first day, I got a slip that was called a curriculum action slip, that they wanted to add 1 hour to the curriculum, and it took 2 years for them to get this through to make the change. That would be done within a matter of a week or two here, if even that long. So what we're saying is you've got to be comfortable with change if you come here, because you're going to see us when we get data. If we see a better way to get a better outcome, we're going to move, and that's something that's about it. So that's kind of a little opening and gives you a little sense of who we are. We're going to talk a lot about how we do things in a few minutes so that you understand that this is not the usual dental program that you may have heard about. Wayne, shall we go on? A couple of quick facts. One of the, Aaron, I know you know Doug Watson, advisor at UVU, and he made the comment after sitting through one of our interview days, and he did stay awake, by the way. I do want to let you know that. He did well on that. He said, you need to put something up front talking about some of the things that the school is known for. Because he said the students are sitting there wondering about, do people graduate? Do they get through? How many people get dismissed? All this stuff. So let me give you some quick facts. We're south of Salt Lake City in a suburb called South Jordan. Beautiful place. I would highly recommend that you go online and look up the safety statistics for this area, because you need to remember that when you're going to dental school, you're also living wherever you're going to be going, and you need to find out what it's like to be there, what it's like to be there at night, just during in the daytime. So I encourage you to go look at the safety statistics. We have the campus safety statistics on our website. I will give you a preview of what the various categories of crime are. They're all zeros. So when you, I think we may have one. Now, I think there might be one thing on there. But essentially, it's a very unique environment. I've never had something like this. Since 2010, when we opened the dental program, we've had 4 thefts, 4. I used to deal with that many a week at one of my prior institutions. We currently have 100 students per class. Last year, they provided dental treatment at 48,000 patient appointments. Now you got to understand that some of those people are coming back more than once, which we want to see. I mean, when you get into practice, you want your patients to come back. Their student teams are seeing 4 to 6 patients a day. We think we're going to move that to 6 to 8 because of some efficiencies we put in. And just in case you don't know how unusual that is, most dental schools, you see a patient in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. So we're seeing a lot more patients getting a lot more done. We have the new integrated national board exam. First class to take it was the class of 2022. They set a rather interesting standard. 100% of them passed on the first time. That is a remarkable statistic. And for those of you who are thinking about residencies or specialties or things like that, 90% of those who applied to the military, public health, specialty programs got in. So we're seeing some really good things happening and as the reputation of the school gets around. So any questions on that, or are we good? We're good. Let's go on. This is the view out the window. This is more on Dr. Wyndon's side of the building than where I am. We're not in a major downtown metropolitan area. We're out in an area that kind of is suburban. That's what South Jordan is known for. But in the Salt Lake area, there's lots of other stuff out there in between the buildings. And if you look out there, I don't know if you can see it well on your screens, but those black things you see there are cows. So we have cows, horses, we've got Canadian geese. We're in the middle of an office park that's absolutely beautiful. It's a very unusual environment in which to have a school. And yet our patient pool is strong. They come here because they like the quality of care. Let's go on. You want me to talk about this? Do you want to talk about it?
I can talk about it.
Okay.
So I hope you've heard already that Roseman is changing from a 4-year to a 3-year program. Has everyone heard that information? So that's exciting for several different reasons, and I want to talk about those. The first one is for our patients. Our goal in moving to a 3-year program was to increase efficiency. Dr. Harmon talked about most dental schools, you'll treat 1 patient in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Well, think about what that does for your patients. How long do they have to wait to get another appointment and things like that? So it's going to increase efficiency. And also our goal is to improve health outcomes of our patients. So we're not just concerned about their oral health, we're also concerned about their overall health. And that is one of our goals. And we have data to prove that the way that we are doing things is helping that. We also, Dr. Harmon mentioned that we do everything in teams. And so we have a team-based approach. What that does is it creates shorter wait times for our patients. So instead of having to wait for a specific student and when they have space in their schedule and around their classes and so forth, your patients are part of your team as well. And so whoever is in the clinic on that day can see those patients whenever they need to be seen. So much shorter wait times. More appointments are available that way. We want you to be trained to treat patients the way that you will once you're graduated. And so we're not going to give you 4 hours to do a cleaning on a patient because that isn't realistic. And once you're out in the real world, the expectation is that you're going to be seeing between 15 and sometimes 30 patients, depending on what's going on. You can't do 1 patient in the morning and 1 in the afternoon and step into that kind of environment and feel comfortable. So we want to train you that way. And so that's that last point. So those are ideas that will help our patients. Again, this is all data driven. We are monitoring you as students and our patients much more frequently. Every time you do a procedure, you are evaluated by your faculty members. giving you points on what you can do to improve and whether you did good or not, because we also want to celebrate good things. This is in contrast to many schools in which you may be required to say do 15, I don't know, I'm not a dentist, so I can't go 15 crowns. And so you're sent off to do that, but in the evenings you're practicing crowns in the simulation clinic. There's no one there. There are no faculty members there to tell you whether or not you're doing a good job or not. And so you may be practicing bad procedures, sorry, I need a Dr. Pepper, bad processes over and over again and not be aware of it. We don't have that happen here. You are being evaluated constantly by your faculty members to help you improve. And not only your faculty members, but your other team members, your other students that you're paired with, other D1, D2, D3, or D4. Well, we won't have D4 by the time you're here. Students to help you out. By the way, if you've already applied, you will be applying to a 4-year program. That next year that starts this coming August, or actually July 1st, not July 1st, July 31st, that is a 4-year program. If you're applying for the following year, that will be our first 3-year program. So I want to make sure that you're all clear on that. But both of them really are following the same idea. We also are doing lots of research. So in all of those data points that we have, we're able to determine where our efficiencies are, where we're having problems, what can we do to make things better for our patients. So those are some ideas about the 3-year program. Here are some of the advantages. It's curriculum driven also. So when we look at the way that we teach, Dr. Harmon mentioned that we eliminated, for the most part, competition and instead foster cooperation and collaboration. That in itself helps the learning environment. And we'll talk more about our learning environment in just a few minutes. It's called the 3 commitments and the 6-point mastery learning model that we'd love to talk to you about. But those kind of things increases each individual's achievement in the curriculum. We've also been blessed because several years ago, they announced that they were moving from a Part 1 and Part 2 national boards to an integrated national board. And that has done several things for us. I don't know if you're aware, but Part 1 in the past was focused on biomedical sciences, and Part 2 was focused on the clinical sciences, which meant as a dental school, our first couple of years had to be focused on biomedical, and the last 2 years had to be focused on clinical just to prepare you for boards. But that is now gone. Now you take an integrated national board, and for our students, that's at the end of their 3rd year. But that's allowed us to change the way that our curriculum looks. We no longer have the biomedical sciences up front. Instead, they're scattered throughout your curriculum. And we'll talk about how and why we've done that in just a few minutes, but we're excited about that. And this class that just graduated, we've started moving them into that type of curriculum 4 years ago. And we can see one evidence of that is that 100% of the class that just graduated passed the integrated national boards on their first attempt. And Dr. Carroll, hopefully he just joined us. Hopefully I can say this, but I'm going to do it anyway. But we've had 35 students of our current class take the national boards, and so far all 35 of them have passed.
That's correct. Actually, I just found out, 36. So
36, fabulous. And another point of this is that we have not had any dismissals for academic reasons. The way that our curriculum is set up, it is for success. We are part of your team. We're here to support you. And we want everyone to graduate. And so far, again, we've not had any dismissals because of academic reasons. It's also student driven. Our students are important. We care about you. We want you to be successful in dental school, but also beyond that. So first off, one of our real concerns in moving to a 3-year program was the cost of dental school. It is extremely expensive. There's no way around that. So one thing that the 3-year curriculum does is that instead of paying for 4 years of tuition, you are instead paying for 3 years of curriculum. And let me let you know this is not moving 4 years of tuition and crunching it into 3 years. Our board has, the university has allowed us to truly keep the tuition at a 3-year level.
It's a
Which-
25% cut in tuition, essentially.
25% cut in your tuition, housing, and other fees as well, because you're not going to need housing for another year. But it also means that you're now out in the field earning 1 year earlier than your peers, which means that you'll have 1 additional year in your earning potential. And if you look at what that earning potential is at the end of your career, that 1 year could potentially pay for most of your schooling. Also, I have another point there again. Anyway, if I remember, I'll come back to it. We also want to make, the other thing is, because we are preparing you to treat more patients in school and training you that way, you will be more successful in the very first year that you're out of school. So that's another benefit for you. We also want you to be future career ready, and all of the things that we've talked about, seeing more patient, having more patient experiences because you're working in teams. And also we are probably one of the most technologically current colleges in the United States. In fact, our clinic on the 3rd floor, I believe, is probably the most technologically advanced dental clinic in the world. It is amazing. Also, we talked about our students. Students sometimes have the question, will we get into residency programs? And our answer to that is about 30 to 40% in each class typically will apply for a residency or military or health scholarships. And 90% of those that applied last year were accepted, which is a tremendous rate.
That's over the national average of about 60 to 65%, to put that in perspective.
So let me tell you some other things about the 3-year program. It will be accelerated. So the material that you covered in 4 years will be covered in 3 years. Now, we again have looked at data and determined there are some things that you just don't really need to know. Things that were taught because of historical basis or something, but really does not influence your practice, does not influence the way that you'll pass the boards and so forth. And some of those things have been removed, which allows us to accelerate. But there will also be fewer breaks. So you need to be aware of that. It is year round. There is a break during the summer, 1 week break during the summer, and 2 weeks around the winter holidays. It also may involve some hours in the evening for clinics. Our external rotations will be focused much more than they have been in the past. The first class will start in June of 2023 and will graduate in June of 2026, 3 years later. So that's a little bit about our 3-year program. Do any of you have any questions? We've been talking for quite some time.
I want to add something before we go to the Q&A. I used to be at the University of the Pacific as associate dean. Great school, I love it. They've been on a 3-year format since the 1970s. I know from having experienced that this is not only possible, I think it's preferable. When my wife graduated from dental school in 1974, yes, I did not misstate the year, 1974, it's been a while back, Ohio State was a 3-year program. In fact, about 18 of the dental schools at that point were 3-year programs. So the history of 3-year programs goes way back. The thing is, they are more intense. They require more resources from the faculty and administration. And when federal funding ran out for those programs, they switched back largely to the 4-year format. So, I mean, this is not unprecedented. We're returning to it and improving on it. So I think that's important. There's one other.
We really do believe that it will be an advantage for our students.
One thing I forgot to mention, and Dwayne, we need to add this to the slide, is that as of last Tuesday, which is when our students graduated, 97% of them had jobs or residencies lined up. The other 3 were negotiating with other places. We will have 100% placement very shortly, which is really good. So you need to know that as well. Welcome back, Bill.
And this is Dr. Bill Carroll. He's the associate, get it right, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs.
Good to meet everybody.
Let's go on. Unless you have questions. Any questions? Okay. We need to talk with you about our culture. Any of you psychology majors, by the way? Anthropology, sociology? All right, well, let me tell you something about culture. There are two major ways culture can occur, either by design or by accident. And if you look at most schools, they kind of don't think about the culture and it just sort of evolves into something. If they're lucky, it's something that they like. If they're not, they complain about it. We have a very different approach here. And it's basically, we say that we can shape our culture by making and keeping 3 commitments with each other. And this is essential for you all to understand because commitments form the heart of our model. So if we look at it, these 3 commitments determine our culture and also our future. So let's talk a little bit about it. The first is we believe very strongly in being lifelong colleagues. Now, I need to tell you something. This is not something we put up on the wall in a nice frame. This is something that we expect us to do every moment of every day. So when you look at the definition of what we mean by lifelong colleague, it means that we make each and every interaction reflect a sincere desire to develop each other as lifelong colleagues. Now, if you think about that for a minute and just kind of reflect on it, what would and I'm going to ask you this is a question, what would your experience be like if you were in a school where everyone, you included, all of your peers, your faculty, were striving to make each and every interaction reflect a sincere desire to develop each other as lifelong colleagues? Quick comments. I'll let you volunteer. Remember to unmute.
It seems like, can you hear me?
Yes.
It seems like if you have the philosophy of lifelong colleagues, then everything kind of going along with your team method, everything becomes team advancement rather than self-advancement.
Who are the winners in that, you just went off. There you go. Who wins in that scenario?
In a sense, if it's a team, everyone wins.
And I take it one step further, so do your patients. Because if you're helping everyone become good, it means they're all going to be providing better care. Any other comments real quickly?
Yeah, I have something to say. So I think like if you practice this all through dental school, this is something that definitely won't end when you graduate, and you'll carry this on into the business aspect of your life and throughout the rest of your career. And if you have this mindset in the dental practice, this is definitely something that patients will see that sets you apart from other dentists in your area.
Yes, and I will tell you that I'm going to encourage all of you to think about what would it be like for you to be in a school where everyone makes a commitment to helping each other develop as lifelong colleagues. Let me take you to the second commitment, which is the honor code. We also believe that professionalism and ethics can be reinforced during school, and we can demonstrate it. So essentially, our honor code is very simple. It comes from the Air Force Academy with a slight modification. And it's, I will not lie, steal, cheat, disrespect others, nor tolerate among us anyone who does. Who's in charge of our honor code?
Everybody.
Exactly right. So if you look at the honor code, if we truly are making a commitment not to lie, steal, cheat, disrespect others, and we're developing each other as colleagues, again, I ask you to reflect on what would it be like for you to be in that environment for the next 3 years of your life? Unless you've already applied, in which case we're looking at 4 years, but we're good. The third commitment is, I commit to help you become the best you can be at what you do, and we'll celebrate our successes. Because we believe very clearly that we want to improve as a result of our lifelong colleague and honor code commitments. So when we look at this, we want all of us to improve, and that includes when you come in to see any of the 3 of us at any time. We want to be better at doing our jobs when you leave than when you walked in the door. And we feel the same way about that. And we want to celebrate our successes. And I will tell you, this is something we do okay at. We need to get better at it because I think we really need to celebrate more of what we're doing here. And we sometimes get focused on other things and don't do enough of that. So my question to you is this: what would it be like for you to be in a school where you and everyone else are making and keeping is the essential part, making and keeping these commitments with each other? What would that culture be like for you? I will tell you that there's only one other school that I think matches us on this, and they're starting to worry about catching up now. I'll put it that way. This is something you really need to think about, and because this is important. You will be living at whatever school you choose for the next 3 or 4 years of your life. You need to know what the culture looks like. This is who we are. Let's go on. What do you see in this picture? I'm looking for a response. Yes, thank you.
No wrong answers. Just what do you see?
I believe those are roof shingles.
I think you might be right. Our dean took this photo when he was in Japan. When you look at each individual shingle, what do you see?
They're all different,
Exactly.
unique.
Yeah, I
Each
like
beautiful in
that
its own
word
right.
unique.
Yeah, each beautiful in its own right. But when you bring these tiles that are individually different together, what happens?
I kind of see it like the point of the photo is that like one tile could not cover a whole roof, but when you put them all together, you have this big unit, you have this roof, all made from individual pieces.
Exactly the point. And that's how we look at teams. Each individual within our teams has individual differences, background, skills, experiences, attitudes, beliefs, whatever you want to add into that. And if we manage the culture well, we learn from each other and learn more about how people think about what it means to be human, what it means to provide care for people, what it means to help them attain and maintain health. There's all sorts of advantages that come from working in teams, but I want you to remember that photo because we truly do value individual differences here and because we see how it builds us as a team.
Everyone's important. Everyone has a role to play.
So let's go on. Let's get into some other aspects of our program. Are you talking or am I talking?
I can start here. So as you can see in this next slide, we've moved those 3 commitments to the center of this slide. I want you to always keep in mind that those 3 commitments are at the center or the heart of what we do here at Roseman. They set up that culture and everything else works on it. Roseman is known for its 6-point mastery learning model, and that's represented by those tiles surrounding the 3 commitments. And we're going to take a moment to go through each of those tiles. So we hadn't really discussed who's going to take what part. So
Yeah, you will learn something about us. We kind of do this informally because it keeps us sharp, to be perfectly honest. I'll start with this one.
Okay.
We have a philosophy here that we want you to learn in teams. And we also know that the literature in adult education indicates that people like to be involved with their learning. It's sort of key here that we believe that you need to be involved with your learning, not just a recipient of, but being involved with. Very different type of approach. Dr. Wyndon and I were talking earlier today that this actually is not new in education. There was a major book by John, I just forgot his name again, back in 1928 on experiential learning. But it's taken us almost a century to figure out how to do this in dentistry, and we've figured it out. So literally, when we show you in just a moment what the classroom looks like, you're going to understand that we had to build this dental school from the ground up in order to create the facility where we could have experiential learning. So let's take a look at this. If you think of your traditional classroom, it's usually a lecture hall. Have all of you been in a lecture hall, I take it? Yeah, nod your heads. That would be good. Thank you. Making sure you're staying awake, so we're good. And keeping me awake too, by the way. Traditional lecture hall, you've got a lecturer who talks at the people. Your interaction with others in that classroom, in that lecture hall, is relatively minimal, because if you're sitting back, you're seeing the back of people's heads, and those behind you are seeing the back of your head. There's not much face-to-face interaction. I just can't imagine anymore being in a lecture hall trying to understand learning, because I don't like being talked at. I like being part of and being part of the discussion. So what Roseman did is they actually created classrooms that facilitate communication. They facilitate learning. So if you look at the photo down there, that's Dr. Soph, and you'll notice that the classroom is not in traditional rows in a lecture hall, but rather if you look at the floor plan, the large room has 6 areas in it, which is where the hexagon comes from and some of the things you'll see in our presentation. And essentially, each one of those sections faces all of the others so that you can interact with the other people in the classroom. The faculty can walk around. In fact, we encourage them not to stay in the middle. We want them walking around so that it brings immediacy to it. When you have questions, they can actually walk up, talk with you. And essentially what this enables is even the large group setting becomes interactive. It becomes a very different place to learn. So what might happen is one example. There are many that I could give, but I want to give one. There might be a major topic introduced in the large group, but if you look around that center section, there are all sorts of smaller rooms. Those are breakout rooms. And once a topic has been covered, you go into the breakout rooms and work in teams on projects to learn that material, because this is another thing that we think is very important. Now is the time to learn. In a traditional lecture hall, everybody's scribbling down notes like crazy, trying to keep up with what's going on. They go home at night and then try to sort out what happened during the day. It's a very inefficient way to learn. We prefer going directly from the large group into the small group, where we now learn that material, come back, take it up to the next level, learn it again, master it, and you keep this cycle going where you continually do this. That's done during the day. It's not trying to do it at night when nobody's around to help. Faculty are there. Your team that you're with is there. So we're learning together, identifying anything that is not going the way that it needs to be, getting help right then when it's needed, not after we discover there's a problem, but if we're starting to see something that's not on track, we deal with it. So the way those classrooms are designed is to support this ebb and flow between settings, the large group, the small group, back to higher level, small group, and like this. Now is the time to learn. We do it experientially. So one of the things that I would encourage you to write down as a question is, do you prefer to learn in a classroom, in a lecture hall, with people talking at you, where you go home by yourself and put the stuff together at night? Or would you prefer a setting where you work in teams, large teams in the classroom, small teams in the breakout? And we're going to talk about how we do that in clinic in a few minutes. There is no right or wrong answer to this. This is personal preference. If you like being in the lecture hall, reading the paper in the back row, have at it. But you won't read the paper here in the back row, because the farthest away you're going to be from a faculty member is 4 rows. We kind of know what's going on. So there is a high degree of interaction going on in these spaces. We refer to this, and I'm not real thrilled with the wording here, as classroom as teacher, because what they're saying is the facility itself can help shape your educational experience by learning something, taking it to a small group to master it, coming back, elevating it, this back and forth, this ebb and flow back and forth. That makes sense to everybody? I've not been in another dental school so far that has done this, and several that have built new buildings recently, when they saw our facility, said, wish we had seen this before we built lecture halls. So I get it. But you can't do this type of learning unless you've got the large space and the small spaces adjacent. Because if you try to do it in a different place in the building, you lose time in the curriculum moving. It just doesn't work. Let's go on.
So I want to talk about what we call the block curriculum. When do you guys have finals?
Next week, I believe.
Next week, okay.
Yeah.
Courtney, I haven't heard from you. How many finals do you have next week?
It's 2 weeks. Finals is 2 weeks. Dead week is next week, y'all. Some of you
Okay.
have finals next week because dead week is next week and our teachers are mean to us. But finals is technically the first week of May. So, but how many finals do you have, Courtney?
I only have one final test technically, but I have a few different projects.
I just wanted to clarify.
How about you, Cassie? Is it Cassie?
Same. I only have one actually like actual final.
How about you, Owen?
I try not to think about it too hard till I get there.
Okay, Andrew?
I think I have 3.
3? Okay.
Yeah.
Typical in undergraduates, 3 to 5. Dental school, 7 to what was the average? 7 to 14, I think is what the average, but we've heard as high as 21 finals all at once. How does that make you feel? When I tell you you might have, let's say 10 finals all at the same time, how does that make you feel? Courtney's shivering. Yeah, it's a rotten feeling. And obviously, if that's the case, then you're going to have to make some decisions, right? Because you're not going to perform well in every single one of those finals. That's just reality. So we've decided to do something different, because why would we want to set you up for failure? That seems a really ridiculous thing to do for an educational organization, is to set students up for failure. So we do things differently. We do things in what we call a block curriculum. So in a block curriculum, instead of having multiple courses at the same time, you have one course at a time, one didactic course, and then potentially one clinical course at the same time. But that's it. And the expectation is that you will master the material in that block. And a block we've got some blocks that are as short as 3 or 4 days, others that are as long as 4 weeks, but the typical block is about 2 to 3 weeks long. So during that time, you will meet every day with your faculty members. You'll go through the learning environment that Dr. Harmon talked about, being in the classroom, in small breakout rooms, working on things together, getting questions answered while the faculty are present with you. And the expectation is that you master that material. And I'll talk about how we master that material in just a few moments. But the idea is that we want you to know this material. We teach you what is important, and we expect you to master that. If I'm teaching you a course in emergency dental or emergency dental emergencies, I don't want some student that scores a 70%, which in some schools is a pass, and then I go visit them in their dental office and have a heart attack in their chair. We want you to master all the material that we teach, and we do that through the block curriculum.
I'll insert something here. When I first started learning about the Roseman model of teaching in blocks, I was telling my wife about it. My wife's a dentist, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm telling her that I do one block at a time, perhaps paired with something clinically, but one academic block at a time. She went like this, and she said, wait a minute, there's no term in which they've got 21 finals? I said, no. And then I heard about what it was like for her trying to do 21 finals between Monday and Saturday in dental school. Now, some dental schools only have 7 per week, others have 14. There are some that still do more. But when you look at it, it's just an unnecessary stress that we don't need to put there. We can teach more effectively in blocks than we can in the concurrent model.
So let me reiterate, there are no midterm or final weeks.
I think you're probably starting to see the relationship between the block system and the physical facility, because we couldn't do these blocks without having the physical facility that allows the back and forth between the large and small spaces.
Yeah, Courtney.
So I just was wondering, with this kind of setup of like having, I guess, like shorter classes, like how students are able to like make connections with faculty and stuff when they're only given such like short amount of times. Are they seeing the same faculty frequently for different blocks? I just would wonder that as far as like getting into residencies and stuff.
Well, your faculty are in your classroom all the time. We also have an open door policy, and so faculty are available. I'm wondering, is part of your question about retention of the material? Was that your question, or was it just faculty availability?
That wasn't necessarily my original question. That is a question that I also have, but more of like having a relationship with faculty in order to like get letters of rec or be familiar with, if they do a specialty, like get familiar with what they've done and like communicate with them about your goals and stuff was more of what I was getting at.
That is yes.
Because of the environment of the class, again, you're never more than 4 rows apart from your faculty. You're also spending 4 hours a day with them on a consistent basis. I would say from my own experience, because I've taught at other universities when I'm teaching in a discussion hall, and I get to know maybe 2 or 3 people in the first 2 or 3 rows, and that's it. But in this situation, because I'm with them on a more consistent basis and they're closer to me, plus when they're doing their activities, I'm wandering through those breakout rooms and answering questions and asking more questions and so forth. I would say that I have a much better handle on my students and than I have in any other environment.
Dr. Carroll and I write a lot of the letters, the first drafts of a lot of the letters for programs, residency programs, as well as military and all that. And I will tell you that the level of knowledge that our faculty have of our students goes beyond anything I've experienced at any other dental school I've been at. And that's part of it. They reflect that in the letters. And you may recall that I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Wyndham did as well, that we have a 90+% success rate in getting into programs. The reason for that is our faculty know our students. We have extensive data. Remember, we talked about we're tracking everything, we're evaluating. That goes into a system where we can access that data and bring it up to put in your letters to show this is how you've been performing. The faculty talk about how you've interacted. We evaluate how you keep commitments, how you work in teams. Those are part of our evaluations. So in reality, we have a ton of data to use in those letters. And part of the reason that we have such a high success rate is we know our students extremely well. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Dr. Carroll, did I miss anything?
That was a great
Courtney,
question, by the way, Courtney.
Yeah, Courtney, one of the things, the reason I was late, I was meeting with students all this afternoon. We're applying for the National Health Scholarship and then residency programs. And it's an open door policy up here. The kids, I leave the door somewhat open unless I'm talking to a student. So, and that's true of all of us. It's a rarity among most institutions. I think part of it is the size of our institution. We're not that big. It's one big building, but it's a much more intimate space than say an institution like most of us went to school. I'm not sure. I remember I've been to downtown Boise enough times. I know Boise State's a pretty good sized campus. Like traditional universities, it's tough to get around it. But here you've got access to us. I teach, so I get to know all my students. I just got done teaching a course, and I teach oral path, and I'm helping out with perio here in a few weeks. So I know I'm up for, and I'm academic dean, and I'm working with my students. They know, I know them. I get to walk around and interact with them, and that I would say my experience and students' experience with me is the same for all our instructors. That's how we operate. So, matter of fact, we'll know more about you than you do when it comes to writing those recs. I can tell you that. We'll bombard you with questions you're not even aware of because we've seen you and worked with you and heard you ask questions in class. So I would say conversely to what you're expecting, there may be more information than you're even aware of, possibly aware of, that we have of how well you're doing and what areas you could use to improve or where we see your strengths are. So it's an unusual situation, but it's very favorable to getting into scholarships as well as into residency programs. As Dr. Herman said, we have a tremendous success rate with that. So one of the highest in the country. So
we have an open door policy, like you mentioned, but
yeah,
Carol, in addition to that, has a big, huge basket of chocolate.
Right here, I'll show it to you. And I've got Utah truffles in it right now. So
yeah, you saw me reach down a minute ago.
Yeah.
Chocolate. I can't see it. Yeah.
So,
I believe in chocolate. The healing power of chocolate is magnificent. I will tell you that so far today, I think Dr. Carroll had about the same number. I've spent 4 hours today with students who are applying for the National Health Service Corps, about an hour each. So when I look at the letters that we're putting out, they're informed not only by the data, we also meet with the students, get additional information, look for themes that they can use. It's a much more intense process than I've ever had before. It's wonderful. I rather enjoy that. Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so
Bill, you want to take the,
Yeah. There's an interesting shift in thinking also that I want you to really think about. And again, this goes back to, do you match with the way we do things? There are two basic approaches to education. One's called normative, the other's called competency-based. Let's talk about what normative means. If you're at a school where you basically are graded with an A, B, C, D, or a percentage or something like that, it's normative, meaning that you're looking at the class average, you're taking those that do better than the average as A's, those that do worse get lower grades. It doesn't get to where we want to be, because as Dr. Wyndham mentioned a few minutes ago, with the medical emergencies class example, we want you to be competent. It's not that we want you to sort of be there, we want you to reach competency. Very important. And if you think about your driver's test, Dr. Carroll came up with this example several years ago. If you think about your driver's test, when you took it, you either passed it or you didn't. It's not that you sort of got a grade saying, oh, you didn't do quite as well as we wanted on the surface streets. So you're only, or on the freeway driving, you can only drive on surface streets, or you can only drive during this hours. You had to know the material. You either were competent or not yet competent. And I think the key word there is yet. So when we look at this, on grades, they look at the average, you're compared against each other. I don't like that system. I can't believe I ever taught it anymore. I spent many years giving grades. But rather, if you start looking at saying, are you competent? It opens up a different way of thinking about it. So if we go on, we set a competency rate, and you're all going to feel a tightening in your stomach. Don't worry, we're going to untighten that in just a minute. But essentially, we have two grades. I hesitate to call them that. I'd rather call them assessments. You either have passed or you haven't yet passed. What do? If you look at what the faculty say you need to know in that course, you have to hit 90% or higher to pass. Now, the next question that people ask, does anybody ever graduate? You remember I said 100% of the class that we just graduated were there? They get it. 90% is the pass rate. If you're at 89%, are you failing the course? That's a question. The answer is no, but you're not yet at the pass level. So we need to do something to get you up to this pass level. This is one of the most unique parts of our program, is that we are constantly measuring your progress to make sure that you are getting up to that competency level. So how do we do that? We're going to look at didactic blocks, and then we're going to talk about clinical education in a moment. So let's take a look at the next slide. How do we get you to 90%? This has to do with assessment learning. At Roseman, we look at assessments. Some people could call them tests, quizzes, whatever they might want to call it, as opportunities to learn. I have been in courses as a student, and I've taught courses where we did the final exam. We never knew how we did, and it doesn't exactly help you improve. That's not what I call assessment learning. That's finishing an exam. Assessment learning is when you take the assessment, we give you feedback immediately on how you're doing. So if we can look at the next slide. The traditional assessment system is you have multiple midterms, multiple finals, you finish the course, and if your grade is a C or a D, the question is, what next? And that's not our idea on how to use assessment. We have a different way, saying that we want to look at how we evaluate you frequently and intervene when you need help. So let's look at the assessment system is exactly that. We assess frequently, several times during the day, and intervene at the time help is needed, not after the course is finished. That's a terrible time to figure out what to do. because you finished that medical emergency course with a D. What do you do at that point? You passed. An F or an E, you have to repeat it. So at least we've got a chance of doing something. We prefer not to be there. We'd rather do it more frequently. So let's take a look at the way this works in didactics. First of all, we do frequent ungraded quizzes. It might be at the beginning of the day, it might be during the day, but it gives you and the faculty an idea of how you're doing. If a problem has emerged, we can deal with it right then. And the key to this is understanding we can intervene at the time help is needed. Then approximately every 2 to 3 weeks, we do an exam, essentially. And this is, we call it an individual assessment. It's not unlike what you're doing with finals. You sit down, you take the individual test, it goes off to be scored. While you do that, you go back into your breakout room with your team that you've been studying with during this block, and you take the same exam together. And the idea here is you debate the answers, you think about why this answer is more likely correct than this one. You learn from the discussion. It's sort of like what you're going to do as a practitioner of discussing treatment with other practitioners. It's the same sort of thing where we're enabling you to learn how to discuss these things. Good. So while your team takes the exam, you turn that in, then the next thing that happens while these things are all off getting scored is you go into a faculty discussion. And this is done after the assessment's been completed. The faculty go through the exam a third time, looking to answer any questions you might have that might need to be clarified. Why is this answer not correct? What is it that we're not understanding? And it gives us an opportunity to use 3 different types of assessment: individual, in your team, and then a discussion with the faculty to help master that material even more than you have before you walked in the exam. Now, what happens next is we get the scores back. And if your individual assessment is 90%, you pass. If your team also got the thing correct, we'll add 5% to the individual score because we think that discussion is so valuable that we want to reinforce that by giving some extra points. So if you're sitting at an 89 and you get 5%, you just passed that block. But if you're at 84% and you're not, and you add that 5%, we're not yet ready to say you're competent in that area. So if you didn't pass it, what happens next, and this is brilliant, we have an additional learning opportunity where you and the faculty sit down and go over the material that you didn't perform well on. You go off, you have some individual study time where you go off and study it, and then you come back and you do an assessment. It's another reassessment of that. There are 2 outcomes, very simple. You either pass it at that point, which most people do, or there might be a no pass. Okay, but let's go the no pass route. If you didn't pass then at that point, then you go into, is it still several days to a week? Okay, I wanted to double check. You go in and you do a remediation and a reassessment. That's where you sit down with the faculty for several days. There might be a few of you in the group. And then at the end, you reassess. There are 2 outcomes. You already know what the 2 outcomes are. You pass at 90%, or you have to do something else if you don't quite hit that. And in this particular case, it would most likely be repeat the block in a subsequent year. Now, the key thing I want you to really focus on here is rather than using a test like an exam as the final thing that happens in it, and you get a score that you don't like or you don't know the material well, what we're saying is to get you up to that 90%, you do it individually, you do it in a team, you have faculty discussions, you go into these additional learning things, you have an additional thing. There are points at which we can continue to move you up in your performance so that you are successful. Now, key to this, we don't average, we don't curve, we don't lower the standard. There is a standard of 90% that is constant. So essentially, you're going to be getting there through this assessment model. So we use the data, the information we get back to help intervene at the time help is needed throughout the time that you're in the block. And then this system helps strengthen. How does that sound to you? Does the 90% sound less threatening now? Andrew, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that the whole idea around a pass being a 90% instead of a pass being anything above like a 70 or whatever it typically is great, because I know personally whatever dentist I had working on me, I wouldn't want him passing any courses with, say, an 80. I'd want him to definitely have that 90% grasp on the material.
That is one of the most frequent reactions we hear from people that learn about this model. Is then the next statement is, why aren't all schools getting it to the 90% or higher level? I mean, it just makes sense.
I also just want to point out, can you see that we make it so that that happens? We're there to support you. The system is there to support you. Everything we do is there to bring you to that level. I've taught in other places where they've told me, okay, I need you to fail 40% of your class. This is a weed out class. And so that is ridiculous. It is so against everything I feel as an educator. But here at Roseman, it's so great because we're together. We're on the same team, and all of that's designed from the building up to help you to support you be successful.
The question that we ask of you at this point is to think about, do you want to stay in an environment where you did midterms and finals, multiple midterms, multiple finals? Or do you want to be in a system like this where you are being assessed against the standard that you must meet to show competency, and have a support system like this to get you to it? And that's kind of what you need to be thinking about when you think about the style of education that you're going to select for dental school. Good?
So I have the next question for you. Part of our model is early experiential learning and active and collaborative learning, which we talked a little bit about. But as far as the early experiential learning, ask yourself, when do you, once you're in dental school, want to start treating patients? You know when the average dental school begins putting you into the clinic? Anybody know?
Year 2.
End of year 2 or the 3rd year. At Roseman, we put you into the clinic within the 1st month. And there's rationale behind that. We didn't just do that because we thought it sounded like a good idea, but we look at data, we look at adult learning theory, which tells us that you as adults learn from being part of the system, being involved in it. And I want you to start thinking about yourself, thinking of yourself in the role of a dentist right from the very beginning. So I'm going to put you in the clinic. Now, obviously, I'm not going to put you in the clinic and give you a handpiece and say, you know, go take care of this tooth, drill out that caries and maybe put on a crown. That would be unwise for both you and me and your patient, most importantly. But there are some things that I want you to start learning as I put you into the clinic. You are in a team, so you're going to be paired with other students from, if you're a D1, paired with D2 or D3 students who've been around the block a little bit, been there since their 1st year. They're doing procedures. You're also paired with a faculty member, and you're going to begin by just observing. Now, the value here is particularly in the behavioral skills. You're going to start learning how to talk to your patients. Some of you may be uncomfortable talking to someone. We're going to get you over that really quick. We're going to teach you how to take histories, medical histories, social histories. We're going to teach you how to treatment plan. All of those basic things that help develop your thought process of what do I need to do for this patient. And really by the middle of your 1st year, you will be treating patients. You'll be doing things like trophies, cleanings, and so forth, and begin being the primary provider for your patients in your team. We think that's really important, and some really interesting things have come out of that I'll share in just a moment. Traditionally, so the traditional model is that you will have taken your biomedical sciences, your behavioral sciences in your first couple of years, then you'll have some preclinical things, and then finally, at the end of your 2nd year, into your 3rd year, you'll finally get into the clinic. The problem is with that system, those things, let's say in your biomedical sciences in your 1st year, You studied anatomy and physiology and pathology. How much are you going to retain having not looked at that material again now 2 years later? I know I can barely remember what happened last week, let alone 2 years ago. So we have to look at things differently. Another way that a traditional way of looking at things was clinic is the end goal. And I have these things like behavioral sciences, biomedical sciences, and even the pre-clinic sciences. They're hoops that I have to jump through. And once I get there, then I can actually work as a dentist. And another issue that I have with the traditional model is you guys are preparing for dental school. And so what kind of courses are you taking right now? Science, right? You're taking all of your heavy science classes, right? To prepare you to take the DAT and to go to dental school. Well, in the traditional model, as soon as you get to dental school, guess what? You get to do them all again. And then eventually you'll get into the clinic. We've designed things differently because I want you to take that material that you've taken in the biomedical sciences, and I need you to apply it. First off, you'll remember the material better. And secondly, it will make you a better provider for your patients, able to provide care for your patients. So let's look at the Roseman model. We call it the heart and science model. Each area is important. None of them can be separated, and all of them are taught from the very first year. So the biomedical sciences, what do? Well, combined with the clinical experience, now the biomedical sciences provide insights into what allows you to produce to provide the best person-centered care. And so now that I've had my anatomy and physiology, now I can look at these clinical experiences and say, oh, that's why I need to know all of those parts of the mandible, because I'm going to be giving an injection and I need to know what bony landmarks there are so that I can put that injection right where it needs to be. Can you see the application? That's what we want. Those are the ties that we want you to make. I also want to point something else out before I go on, and that is the term person-centered care. It's a term that's been used in medicine for quite some time, but in dental sciences, we're really trying to start to get a handle on that. And what that means is I'm not just treating a tooth. There's a person behind that tooth, and behind that person is a family, is an environment, is a community, and all of those things are parts that you need to be aware of as a healthcare provider to provide the best care that you possibly can. You can't ignore the fact that this person has heart disease or has diabetes or that their family is struggling and they can't even get to your clinic because they can't afford the gas. Those are important things for you to know. So let's look at what the behavioral sciences do for us. Understanding a fuller picture of your patient, their family, and other dynamics like access to care. Can they pay for it? Is there a language barrier? Is there someone else that has a really serious health problem like cancer and they just can't be bothered with this because it's not a higher priority? Those are the kind of things that you need to know and learn in your behavioral science courses, and that you learn by taking courses, but also standing side by side in your team and watching others ask those questions and help treat those problems. The pre-clinic, it's important because that's where you're going to learn these skills. You're going to practice in the pre-clinic and become competent before you then actually hold that handpiece in the clinic. And in the clinic, once you're there and you're doing something and your faculty or your students say, hey, you know, you had a little problem with that. Why don't you go back to the pre-clinic and practice, and I'll go down with you and we'll work on that together so that you're competent, that you're really good at what you're doing. That's how we see the pre-clinic. And then so the clinic itself, with all of those other experiences, are about providing, again, the best person-centered care that's possible. But that's only possible because the biomedical sciences, because the behavioral sciences, and because the preclinical sciences. They're not separate. They are all part of the same thing. So I want to give you an example. Let's look at diabetes. Let me ask you guys some questions. I want you to answer these. What do you know about diabetes? This would be a behavioral science issue. What do you know? And nothing is an okay answer, by the way.
From what I know about diabetes, it's a severe form of insulin resistance in the body.
Okay, so that's a start. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone want to add anything else?
It
Any of
affects
you diabetic?
it affects the nerves, it affects the muscles, it can cause wounds on feet and all over one's body. It
Yeah,
can
so
cause
why?
oral sores if
so
it's not treated properly.
Right, so those are all the kind of things that we're going to teach you in the biomedical sciences. In the behavioral sciences, what are some questions that I, as a practitioner, as a dentist, should I be asking my patients when they come in? Does it matter? Does it matter if my patient has diabetes? What should I be asking?
I think
Again,
it
there are no
matters
wrong answers. Throw something out there. Courtney?
probably because of what they consume, because I would guess that their diet is different and that's going to affect your oral health.
Okay, diet. So let me ask you a question. Is there a difference between a type 1 diabetic and a type 2 diabetic in their diets?
Yeah,
Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah. So there are some questions that I need to be asking. How about in the pre-clinic?
Well, they may not even know that they have diabetes, and they may not realize they have some behavioral issues that create the impact of diabetes in itself.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. There are so many people that are either pre-diabetic or diabetic and not even aware of it. I think the estimates are between 30 and 50%. So in the pre-clinic, what are some procedures that I may need to change because someone is diabetic? Well, do you see how these are all questions that inform us because of the other things, the biomedical sciences, the behavioral sciences, and preclinical sciences that then allow me to ask the right questions? How do I treat my patient differently because of diabetes? So these are some things that I would look at. So biomedical, I want to understand the anatomy. I want to know about the pancreas. I want to know about pharmacology and insulin. And Owen, did you talk about insulin resistance? We lost somebody. What about glucose metabolism? What about wound healing? Can I identify abnormal lesions? What's normal and what's not normal? Pathology. What's an A1C? Anyone know what an A1C is? Hemoglobin A1C? It's a measurement that we use that indicates how well am I managing my diabetes. So those are some things that I learn about from biomedical sciences that are going to influence the way that I treat my patient. Behavioral sciences. Do they have access to care? Again, all those ideas. Can they afford the medication that they need? I have an individual in my neighborhood. They're a relatively poor family. They're students and they have a son who's 3 years old and needs insulin. And they struggle. They don't have insurance and they struggle because they can't afford his insulin. And it's life and death. Do these individuals understand the relationship between oral health and diabetes? So teaching opportunities here. In the preclinic, what parts of my treatment plan need to focus on diabetes care? Not oral health care, but diabetes care. Are there procedures that would be better suited for a patient with diabetes than not? How do I tell if their diabetes is being controlled? And then finally, how do I treat my patient with diabetes differently because of my understanding of the behavioral, biomedical, and clinical or preclinical ideas? When hopefully you see that when I talk about the clinic or the clinical sciences, everything is encompassed in that. The behavioral, the biomedical, and the preclinic, they're really one and the same. And so if I can teach you from the very beginning these pieces and allow you to put them together, can you see how understanding, having some clinical experience is going to help you to understand what's happening in the clinic and why do I need to know these biomedical things? Why do I need to know these behavioral? Because if I had them right at the beginning and didn't have any clinical experience, they're not going to make sense to me. But by having them along the way, and what we have found through doing research is that our students do better on their examinations, they retain the information better, and they reach competency between 6 months and 1 year earlier than students that had the traditional curriculum. So we are excited about our heart and science model. And then ultimately, the most important thing is that our vision of providing the best person-centered care is at the heart of all of this, where all of these things intersect. And by providing the heart and science model, we are able to do that.
Add one thing to what you just said, and that is when you look at the early clinical experience, it also means that you're going to see many patients with diabetes. As you're studying the various sciences as you're going along, you'll learn that there isn't just one presentation, but each individual is indeed individual in terms of what you're looking at, understanding the factors that are contributing to how they're working on controlling if they are. The point is, rather than just reading about diabetes, you're actually talking with people who are dealing with diabetes in their own life. And that's part of the reason why our students learn the material so well. So we've got a few minutes left to talk about the clinical program. Yeah. You want to do this? Or do you...
Yeah, so let me talk about what this slide is showing. Each of those blue dots down in that lower slide indicate an instance in which this student was evaluated. Again, every time that you're in the clinic and you have a patient experience, you are evaluated and you're given feedback about what you can do to improve, or hey, you did a great job, we're happy about that. And what we're looking for is that red line indicating that you are improving, and at a certain point, and we can calculate and figure out what that is, we can say that you have reached competency. Competency is not a single point. I cannot give you a test and with that one test say, congratulations, you're competent. Could have been a great day, or it could have been a really bad day. But over time, when we evaluate you on a daily basis, we can project and see where you're at and improve you. So earlier on when we asked, are you okay with constant feedback? This is what we're talking about. You need to be open to constant feedback because it will help you to improve. But if you can't do that, if that bothers you, this program isn't for you, and that's okay. You may need to do something, but we want to move you in that order from being novice to competence. And again, competency is not a single point. It's a progression and a level that you eventually reach, but we can only do that by evaluating you frequently and over time. I think we're probably about.
I think the only other thing that we wanted to cover was a little bit about the clinical model. When you look at our clinic model, you're going to be in teams. And as we said at the beginning, you're going to have a primary and secondary provider that help you, that will be working directly on the patient, but there will also be other members of the team there. And I want to give you an example of why this is so much more efficient than what we've seen in our prior attempts at education, dental education over the last 50 years. Again, I'm going back to when my wife was in dental school. The model was she would work on a patient by herself with faculty supervision, but there was one student, one patient. Okay, so she's working on the patient. She realizes the patient needs some additional anesthetic. What does she do? She stops work on the patient, goes stand in line to talk about the additional anesthetic that's needed with the faculty member. If the faculty member concurs, then the next step is the dispensary where she stands in line again. And then she's finally back to the patient. What has the patient been doing during this whole time? Sitting, not very patiently, I might add, but they basically sit. Well, when you've got a team, if the primary provider sees that there's something that's needed, either the secondary provider or one of the assistants that's there, one of the earlier dental students can go get that material, come back, treatment continues uninterrupted. It's more efficient. That's part of the reason why we can see so many patients more a day, is that when you look at eliminating those sorts of things that waste time, like stopping treatment, going to see the faculty, the dispensary and back, that's regained in terms of the additional time that you can spend on patient care. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the way that we evaluate in clinic because it truly, as you saw in that graph, that was just a few of the marks as we're going forward. But we have lots of information on how you're doing, and we can look across the different areas to see if there's any problem area that we need to address. So essentially, again, we are using data to look at your performance. The faculty that can then give you feedback, guidance. And Courtney, I was thinking about your question earlier about knowing the faculty. If you listen to what Dr. Winden said a minute ago, it's not unusual for our faculty to take somebody back down to sim clinic and said, let's work on this together and get it so it's going. That just doesn't happen in most places. So it's kind of a cool model, the way that that whole thing is working. Do we have anything else on there? Yeah, there's another thing that I will tell you, and I think Dr. Carroll is back with us. According to the military recruiters, we have more people on military scholarships than any other school in the country. We have a huge number on the health scholarships as well, like the public health service type things. Bill, is there anything you want to add there?
No, just that I think right now, this last graduating class, there were a total of almost 43 to 46 individuals on various scholarships. And when you consider that we have 400 students, you can do the math, it's 10, 11% of the entire student body is on a federal health scholarship. So yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
The other thing is when you get ready to start looking at dental school and how you're going to pay for dental school, financial aid is one route, but if you look at the service routes, either through military or public health, they not only pay your tuition, they give you a stipend, and then you get wonderful experience afterwards. So we thoroughly encourage people to look at those options. What questions do you have of us? I actually have a question of you. Are you starting to understand how we approach education a little differently than the, 90% still sound scary, or is it starting to sound manageable? Courtney, I see you moving your head. Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, so I've actually listened to you guys talk before last year as I was getting ready to look into going into dentistry. And now I'm in my application cycle. So I feel like I'm pretty familiar with your guys' program. And so it didn't scare me as much because I was familiar with it. But I think the thing that I was the most interested in going into this info session was about the 3-year program. But listening to you guys talk about it more, I can see how the school is set up in a way that a 3-year program is possible, coming off of 4 prior.
Yeah, I will tell you that I'm one of the founding deans of the school. And when we started the school, I wanted a 3-year program, as did the president of the university. We kind of got outvoted by the various people because they said it's just too hard to do a 3-year program. It's not. Actually, once it's up and running and we get used, whenever you start something new, it's going to have a few bumps every now and then. It's going to be fun. The joke at Pacific when I was there was, when are we starting the 2-year program? So just this piece of information, that's where we are. Cassie, how are you feeling about it?
I feel better about it because I like the support system that you guys have. And I'm also a person that works better in a group setting, like multiple people, because I'm an international student. So I feel like when I'm in like the big lecture halls, it's harder for me to understand like all the material. But when I go to like tutoring and stuff like that, it's way easier to just understand. So I like that setting.
Cassie, you should tell them where you're from.
I'm from France.
Oh, really?
Bienvenue.
And she wants to be a dentist in France.
Good.
Yeah.
What part of France?
Southern France, so close to Spain, like the Mediterranean part.
Okay. Yeah. Catalonia area or Catalan.
Perpignan.
Yeah. Wow. So I've been there many times. It's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
Courtney, you had a question?
Yeah, it was about the 3-year program, and you mentioned like starting it that there's always going to be bumps and stuff. And I'm going into my application cycle would be next year, the first year that you guys are doing the 3-year program. And I'm just wondering, like, I don't really know how to ask this in a good way, but
Go ahead,
are you
Courtney.
guys like pretty
Does-
confident in this next like first year of, or like the next cycle of students that are going into this 3-year program, and that they'll have a good experience? Because then there's programs like U of P that have been doing it for a while. Is kind of my concern.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
confident.
calm her fears
Yeah.
of being the guinea pig.
Yeah, I'm very confident in the fact that we've actually been moving in this direction for the
Yes.
last 4 years. So like I mentioned, the class that just graduated, we actually moved them into this curriculum when they started. And the difference was that their 4th year was basically just clinical. So they had a lot more clinical experience, but because we were able to look at them and the classes preceding them and do research, we have research that papers that have been published that show that 3-year students are competent and ready to move into into residencies or into practice at that point. So things will tweak a little bit. Things do always around here. We're always looking at change and how to improve things. But I already know, because we have a foundation that shows me that students are ready at the 3rd year. Our students are taking their national boards at the 3rd year.
Yes.
They're taking the
Clinical exam.
not the rep, but the clinical
Oh,
exam
CDMA.
during that time, and they're ready.
Yeah.
So we already know. It's not even a question of do we think they will be. We already know they will be.
Courtney, to put it a little differently than what you just heard, we already know the system works because we've been running it for the last several years.
Yeah.
So the bumps that I'm talking about, I don't care whether you've got a 40-year-old curriculum or a 4-day curriculum, you're going to have bumps in it. At every school I've been at, including Pacific, we've had bumps.
Yep.
And what we do here is we respond to them very rapidly. And the other thing I will tell you as a secret is that we talk with Pacific regularly. In fact, I admitted their dean to dental school. So, I mean, we kind of are in contact and we're sharing best practices. This is not, I'm not worried, I'll put it that way.
And in all full disclosure, Courtney, we've eliminated some of the some of the time that we felt was, you get multiple weeks off, things like that. Those are all gone, but they're filled with clinical experience. We brought up the boards. We've been working on the new curriculum, and a true measure for us was to see if the students this year could pass in the 3rd year. And we brought it up before. Already we've got well over a third, closing on a half of the class done, passed it before the end of the 3rd year, which is for us has been one of the great measurements, if you will, of our success with the new curriculum toward the 3 years. So that helps. So.
Now, I have one more thing.
Go ahead.
I'll add one more thing, and that is our school, like every other dental school, has to go through accreditation.
Yes.
So when we looked at moving to this, we had to provide the accrediting board called the Commission on Dental Accreditation with a full detailed plan, including the research that we have done to get permission to move to the 3-year program. We've got it.
Sure.
So it's been reviewed by the commission. We already know from our own data that it works because we've been doing it now for several years. I think we're going to be fine.
Yep.
Well, I want
Thank
the
you for
students
answering
to ask one more question for the group because it's 4:30 and we want to be mindful, but I want to ask, are any of you who presented today willing to provide email contact for the students if they have some more specific questions that they may not have gotten answered today?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay,
I
so
do
one
wanna-
more question. Who had it?
I want to finish one thought before we go to the question. When we started the first 4-year class, everyone asked, are they going to be able to graduate and do things? All 64 of the class members graduated on time. So when I look at it, we had the same questions being asked about the 4-year program. And if we proposed a 5-year, we'd have the same question. 2 years sounds more interesting to me, but that's okay.
That sounds like a heart attack. Who has the last question? Oh, it's going to be me. Yes.
Okay, go for
What
it.
is the worst thing about being a dentist, and what is the best thing about being a dentist?
Dr. Carroll is the only dentist among us, so
Oh,
that would
Lord.
be his question.
Well, the best thing about being a dentist, my background's hospital dentistry, and I like working with patients that have very complex medical needs and the satisfaction of just making a difference in their life and its day to day. That's the worst thing because it takes time in hospitals and away from my family. So the time problem is, and I tell all the students who are applying for residency to think about that. Make sure you keep a balance. So, but there isn't a day that doesn't go by. I don't say, gee, I wish I'd been a something else. I enjoy being a dentist. So
Thank you for sharing.
sure.
All right. I want to thank everybody from Roseman for coming and sharing their wisdom and information about this program. I know it's helpful to understand exactly how a program works and the culture of it. I think that is one of the hardest things. I know it's easy to look at websites and look at requirements. It's a lot harder for us to deep dive and know about your program. I also want to share with the students in the recording that Roseman is doing their simulation on April 30th. And we have it posted as an event on our events page. And so I would encourage you, if you are able to do that on a Saturday, April 30th, that is the last week of our dead week before we start our finals. But I just posted the link in the chat for the event. So you can sign up and register for that opportunity to go actually see it. So
I should look at when
so I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.